Welcome back to the podcast. We are here with Matt today, MTN Gear, or for you out there, the cool kids, Mountain Gear. We met at SHOT Show at the MDT booth. We had a new product launch. I was really excited about it. We did a video. I'm going to go ahead and link that video in the bio for you guys. But Matt, how's it going? I know we're having a bit of technical difficulties, but we're working through them. All right, you're not in America. You're in New Zealand. You're way over there. It's a whole different day over there.
It is. We're a day ahead here. Um, Typically things work pretty well. Technical issues, there's always something going on. But yeah, we are flat out here. Where I've actually got back home because there's construction going on. Our sort of where we do our work, our facility there. We're expanding quite a bit. It's Wednesday here in New Zealand, the day ahead. And within a week's time, we hope to have a bunch of CNC machines in there. So we're getting sort of walls and insulation kind of finished now. Monday, Tuesday, the electrical, all the wiring is going to be ran, and yeah, hopefully we're into it in a couple of weeks' time.
Oh, it's a special episode because you're in the future, right? And we don't get to
Yeah.
talk to people in the future very often. So that's pretty cool.
No, and it's actually like when you fly from New Zealand to the US, you land before you took off.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Not
Yeah.
So yeah, 12-hour flight, but
Mhm.
18-hour time difference between here and Pacific, I think right now. Might be less than that actually, might be 19 or
That's
21 hours, yeah.
yeah, those are pretty
So
wild. I do the UK flight, and that's 11, right? So it's quite a long time, and I'm terrible at sleeping on flights. My wife sits,
yes.
passes out. I'm just up the entire night, typically like 24 hours, just up straight traveling.
Yeah, yeah, I have the same issue. I feel like I'm getting better, but I just can't sleep in a vehicle, I can't sleep on a plane. Going from New Zealand to Europe is 2 of those flights for us. So
Mhm.
my typical thing is I just don't try not to sleep the night before and hope that I'll sleep on the plane.
Is that working?
Um, it means I sleep a portion of the 24-hour trip
Right.
to get all the way over there, but I don't know, I'd rather be doing something at home, sitting there
Yeah,
on
fair
the
enough.
airplane trying to sleep.
Yep. So, tell us a bit about your company, right? Because I think the way that most people, at least here in the United States, are going to know you is through MDT, right? You have two new sets of bipods that are being launched. You are the creator of those, but those do stem from your company, right? And we know that MDT is a juggernaut in the industry, but often acquiring products from other creators, other companies, and that's your case, right?
Yeah, so I've been selling some form of these bipods for 3 years, coming up 3 years. So they're not a new product,
Hmm.
but I guess now, I mean, I never intended to sell them. Now is really like the perfect time almost for NDT. We've just had a new version of the mountain bipod come out ourselves, um, which obviously is going to become the NDT one. They're in sort of production now with NDT. And, the process for us is I sourced, I manufactured to what extent I had the ability to do that. Um, it's fully assembled everything here. So it's very much a 3-year journey in terms of learning, taking a product from concept to really, I mean, it's not perfect now, but I somewhat got my head around making things easy to manufacture and all those sides of things. And this last version is really where I feel like it's kind of where it should be in terms of we nailed all those tolerance things, which in prototypes it's totally fine. But when you do runs of 1,000 you have parts that should work together but don't necessarily work together perfect. So it's been I've kind of done that development, both, I guess, from a business sense, our capabilities and business and our knowledge within the business. And yeah, now's sort of perfect time for MDT, I guess, to take it on. And we've developed that product in a way which makes it easier and better for them to manufacture too. That wasn't the intention,
Mhm.
but well, it wasn't the intention to make it easier for them, but just easier in general. So it's really a good point for them. But yeah, I've been slowly growing as a business ourselves here for the last really 5 years. I mean, it started off as an inconsequential hobby sort of thing, but it's, yeah, just slowly growing as we've got our name out there a bit more, and as the products have become more commercially viable from a business point of view.
So we'll circle back to the bipods because I think, well, I know that that was the main reason we were going to get on and talk together, right? Because
Mm.
that's really what I saw. That's what I knew. That's what we talked about. But what was sort of some of your initial products that you got into? Was it the bipods, or did you start with some other items?
The very first product was essentially a skull hanger, I think, or a skull. There's some companies there in the US, skull something, because can't remember exactly. But I went to buy one, and shipping to New Zealand was like $100, and the product's like 30.
Mm,
And you go, okay, this doesn't make sense. So I started making my own version of that, and that went through its own development. You do stuff very crudely initially. You figure out how to make it much more efficient. And then other products we had were all really related to my own personal hunting. A bunch of products I've discontinued. But then things like I was using a Tikka rifle at the time, and I was machining out the bolt handles to save weight. So I designed and produced a titanium 3D printed bolt handle, which is a quarter of the factory bolt handle weight. And so I'm still selling some of those products like
mhm.
that. Um, and just as time goes on, develop more complicated, more complex, more uh, expensive from a prototype funding, production, sales point of view as well. So just yeah, it's been a slow build.
Yeah, so we often focus on long range precision competition shooting, right? Through this platform, through these podcasts. But I sort of thought that you were a unique take on this because it's sort of an area that I don't pay enough attention to, which is hunting, right? Especially, long range hunting and in any capacity, depending on the caliber, there needs to be to have ethical shots. There needs to be a high level of precision that's in there, and it sounds like your sort of development into this was through hunting. And it sounded like when we were talking relatively like terrain, like a lot of terrain, and somewhat difficult, and that's why you sort of wanted to work on getting things that were maybe already there but try to make them lighter, easier to carry around. Is that right?
Yeah, I it's a strange blend now, and the two are kind of getting closer together in a way.
Hmm.
Not pure target shooting, but like NRL hunter stuff like that,
Yeah.
and also so just as a mechanical engineer myself, you have an appreciation for performance, quality products. A lot of the places I hunt in New Zealand, like the country is really big.
Hmm.
And a lot of places in the US are like this too. And it's just open and there's no places to hide, but between you and the animal. And
Hmm.
that distance might be uh, 800 yards. And it's just like, there's nothing between me and this animal to hide behind.
Hmm.
So you're kind of pushed into this. You don't necessarily want to shoot long range hunting, but you're pushed into this. If I want to make this happen, I have to be able to shoot 700 yards. If if the wind and the weather sort of allow you to pull off an accurate first shot at that distance. So
Mhm.
while I'm not a target PRS shooter as such myself, I have a general interest, would like to do more of that if I had the time, but
Mhm.
really a lot of my inspiration has come from there and say, how do we get this in a lightweight, something that works for hunting?
Right. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. It's interesting in the States, right? Because we have such contrasting terrain here, right? Depending on what state you in or
Yes.
even within a state, right? Particularly where I live, like an hour and a half up, I'm in, the mountains in Tahoe. An hour and a half, I'm at the beach. 2 hours, I'm into wine country. And so it
Mhm.
definitely varies in that way. And so we're in a lot of ways very spoiled because I think we can do a ton of a ton of close range hunting, right? It's why I think bow hunting is so popular in the States as well because, you can do it. So it's really interesting to hear that vantage point that by necessity you guys are pushed out. And I wonder, do you see, I mean, I don't know if you have any comparisons, but do you see that because you guys are in a position where you have to do that, that you guys are getting pretty good at long range shooting just innately be from having to do that, right? I mean, it's pretty long shots.
Yeah, I mean, in a lot of ways, it's very similar here. Like the West Coast is, I guess, somewhat similar to the West Coast in the US,
Mhm.
particularly the northern coast, where it's dense and wet,
Mhm.
and even the mountains there are much more. They have more rock and they're more broken, and so you can hunt with shooting up to 300 yards most of the times.
Mhm.
But when you jump over to the East Coast and a lot of places for hunting tar, like a lot of these valleys are gigantic, um, a mile across, the valley floor sort of situation. So it's just everything's much more bland. And a lot of these places, naturally, there's no like vegetation larger than sort of native grasses and tussocks.
Mhm.
So it's just very open, very large, and, like, some of these places I've hunted from the valley floor to the top, well, not even to the top, but near the top where I've hunted and camped, like, the climb is greater than climbing out of the Grand Canyon, like, it's
Wow.
over a mile vertical. So, yeah, the country depending on the situation, the country's just big. I would typically say most New Zealanders are not set up super well to shoot long range,
Mhm.
but it's becoming more popular as it is in the US and people are picking on and there's just a general improvement in shooting. So it's not uncommon for people to be able to shoot 500 meters, bit over 500 yards.
What
But
does
yeah, trying
the
to do that really well is
Mhm.
something different.
What does the competition scene look like there?
There is quite a few competitions sort of run by a few different um, people, sort of organizations. It's a reasonably small scene. There's 3 or 4 people who are maybe a little bit more than that, but up to 10 people who are like truly competitive.
And this is in what discipline is it for PRS?
Yeah, there's mm, from well, there's a number. The main is that I'm talking about is PRS style.
Mhm.
There is also quite I mean, a historical competition between things like NZDA clubs, which is the New Zealand Deerstalkers Association,
Mhm.
kind of somewhat similar to, like a Rocky Mountain goat sort of thing where, I mean, but that's just all we have in New Zealand. So they
Mhm.
somewhat speak for a large portion of firearm owners.
Mhm.
Um, and but they're typically more like bench rest. There is a few rifle competitions, which used to be a big deal back in the day, but that's more just like everyone line up and go prone and shoot targets.
Sure. That
But
makes a
the
lot of sense.
PRS scene is definitely building.
Okay. Well, that's cool. So you're,
Yeah.
you're making a few little things. You clearly have a mind for building and for designing. What makes you start to do that transition over to wanting to make your own bipods?
So I purchased a SkyPod probably pretty early on after MDT purchased that design.
Hmm.
And it was sort of the only, other than some of those like F class bipods out there, but it was the only one I was really aware of that had quick spread, leg spread adjustment. And
Hmm.
I think it probably was at the time, in any widespread way anyway. And I really liked that product, but obviously the weight, and there was a few other minor bits and pieces just for hunting that I thought could be improved upon. I did a design for that, sort of like, or sorry, I did a design sort of based on that experience I had with that product, and then I priced it all up what I thought it would cost to manufacture, and I just thought that's too much. People aren't going to buy that.
Hmm.
Although I think it might have been less than what I paid for the SkyPod, but at the time,
Sure.
but um, and then I just saw more and more products coming out which were pretty expensive in themselves, and I thought had less capability,
Hmm.
or just not the capability I was looking for. So after a couple of years, I kind of pulled that design back out and yeah, started to try to commercialize it and make a product, and we've had since then, in the last 3 years, we've had sort of four, I wouldn't say major revisions, but four revisions where a portion of the parts are not interchangeable between versions.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, that I guess the first time I started to design anything bipod related was about 5 years ago, and then 3 years ago brought the first one to market, and yeah, it's been 3 years since then.
It's a pretty bold move, right? To have a arguably one of the best bipods or series of bipods that have ever come out, the Skypods, and feel like there's improvement that can be made, right? And obviously, I think you know, happenstance by what you're at in case use obviously fueled a lot of that. But it's something that, like, when I looked at that, I was like, oh, I don't know if anybody can ever make a better bipod than these, right? Not to say that there aren't other companies that have really good bipods, but I thought, these are good, right? These sort of do the job. Um, and so I think that's really interesting and very cool that you're like, okay, I think that there could be a market for this, and this use case makes a lot of sense for me. And to take a chance on that is quite impressive. 5 years ago, moving into 3 years. The material on those, I'm trying to remember exactly, but are they carbon fiber, or what is it that those rods are made out of?
Yeah, I mean, I guess back to the point about the SkyPod, like it wasn't a criticism of that product as such.
Hmm.
It's just a different use case,
Right.
and optimizing it for that.
Hmm.
And when you're climbing a mile to go hunt somewhere, like a vertical mile, not walking a mile, uh, weight really matters.
Hmm.
So, yeah, there's the um, kind of the main motivation behind it. And then in terms of the mountain bipod and the backcountry, the legs are all carbon. Obviously, there's some sacrifice there. There's benefits to the sort of ratchet style that MDT has for them,
Hmm.
but the legs themselves, just from a weight point of view, going to the telescopic sort of tripod legs. It was just a must. And even now, I think the legs and the locking components on the legs themselves, like the carbon tubes and the locking components, I think that's like 45% of the bipod weight.
Mm.
So, yeah, without really drastically reducing that weight, it was just never going to happen.
What's the
So,
overall weight of both of those?
the Arca mountain bipod is 5.7.
Mhm.
I think the Picatinny one's 5.6 ounces, and then the Backcountry is 5 ounces.
Okay. For your use case for this long range hunting or this highly highly driven and elevated hunting that you're doing, what's a typical build? What weight are you trying to keep your system at?
Yeah, I mean, my philosophy is not necessarily just as light as you can go,
Hmm.
but it's getting the most capability, functionality for the least weight. So save a bit of weight here, chuck on a better scope.
Right.
And I like first focal plane scopes too, which are typically heavier.
Hmm.
But I guess the standard sort of starting weight for a rifle in New Zealand is really a Tikka, which is 2.8 kgs, I think.
Okay.
Like no beer, no scope. Um, and then I guess to you're getting to a high end build, some of those rifles are 3 kgs with a scope, which I'll just do the
That's about like, what is that, 7.5 pounds or something? 8 pounds?
3 kgs is 6.6 pounds.
6.6.
So some people are hunting with setups roughly that weight. Probably not including a bipod and bits and pieces like that, but as a scoped rifle.
Hmm.
I think my rifle right now with a NX8 and a chassis, magazine, bipod, small suppressor is about 7.5 pounds.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's quite light. I've always sort of heard that like 15 pounds, something like that, around there is like the ideal. Granted, it depends on the caliber you're using, and obviously you have to that recoil management is really important. But I've always heard somewhere around there, and so that makes sense. So you sort of start to develop these things. At what point in this process are you reaching out to MDT? Or are they reaching out to you? I mean, how do you go from New Zealand to Canada, and make this connection?
Yeah, so they reached out to me. I mean, I had no intention of selling the bipods. I think NDT is somewhat always in a process of reaching out to people to some extent.
Hmm.
So I know I wasn't the only person they were talking to. Um, and I don't know, maybe I'd like to think maybe I had the better product,
Mm.
uh, easier for them to make.
Yeah.
Me personally being easier for them to deal with, I'm not sure. But it was sort of like that started a 6 month process of somewhat going round and round in circles
Hmm.
in terms of how an agreement might work.
And this is like 6 months ago, or is this like how far ago?
Basically, yeah.
Okay, so it was like 6 months ago. Hey, we're having Shot Show in January. We want you to be there for the launch.
Yeah, it was really driven about trying to get it out for short show.
Okay. Yeah, it makes sense,
Yeah.
right? It's where I know for myself, all right, there's no other time in the year that I'm really even thinking products are launched. Um,
Yeah.
and so Shot Show is always the time that I'm looking for something to come out. So that makes sense. That's a quick turnaround. How was that for you?
yeah, it was quite pressured,
Hmm.
but I guess from my point of view in terms of selling a product and getting, the most I could for myself, the thing I'm really offering is a product that's ready to go.
Hmm.
So we signed the agreement between Christmas and New Year's, which is obviously not long before SHOT Show and
Hmm.
right in the middle of the holiday period. There's some holiday here in New Zealand.
Yeah.
So a lot of professionals are totally missing in action from work. So, that throws in a few complications.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was, I guess we were working towards it for a long time anyway.
Hmm.
And I'd already provided designs for them to start the sort of getting them into their system from a manufacturing point of view, and
Hmm.
having ones that they've produced for SHOT Show and stuff like that.
We obviously can't see your face, but I mean, what is the level of excitement in this period, right? I mean, I'd have to imagine, I know you weren't planning to sell it, but MDT, the pretty much like the biggest chassis and accessories company in the world, approaches you, and it's the holiday time, you're getting stuff done. I'm sure it's stressful, but I mean, was there like a decent amount of excitement in this?
MDT was a company I'd always had appreciation for, so it was
Mhm.
definitely exciting to um, be involved to some extent. I guess the main thing is sort of like anxiety.
Yeah, I can see
You
that.
know,
Yeah.
yeah, like you're trying to run your business, you're dealing with you, and you have to operate as if the deal's not going ahead. Um, but then you're trying to work on that deal. That's taking a bunch of time. Things like I had a booth at SHOT Show and other shows anyway, so it's sort of like, do I start putting plans in place for my booth preparation, or am I holding out? It's yeah, it throws in a lot of uncertainties. So it's sort
That's
of
really interesting. So you would have been at SHOT Show regardless of what would have happened, and you probably what you would have been
correct.
like in the extra area or something like that.
Yeah, we had a booth downstairs in the main area,
Okay,
small 10 by 10, nothing fancy. So yeah, it's a lot of uncertainty dealing with that. And just, you pay your fee. It's like I'm going anyway, either way, but
hmm,
do I need to? It's a lot of work preparing for a booth for a show.
sure. Man, that is really nerve wracking, right? I mean, there's a lot of back and forth, and I've been in plenty of situations business wise where it's always like, well, don't cash that check until the deal's closed, man. Don't go start spending money, and so that's super interesting. Um, but I mean, you were like a seasoned pro out there, giving interviews. Like you'd been doing it for years. Had you been doing interviews for years? You're just naturally good at it.
Uh, I mean, marketing generally isn't my thing,
Mm,
but when there's a product you're intimately familiar with and passionate about, it's much easier.
mhm,
But I have at this reasonable number of shows, so I guess just talking to strangers. I mean, you have a common interest
mhm.
in a hobby and product. It's reasonably, I don't know. I feel like it's reasonably easy to do.
Sure, that makes sense. So far as the products, right? I know we've sort of been mentioning them interchangeably in the conversation, but do you want to lay out exactly what it was that MDT acquired, and sort of what the hope is for those? Right? I mean, are they sort of planning on aligning them with some specific chassis or some sort of specific mission with their marketing?
Yeah, I think from MDT's perspective, they have already done the work on the other side. They've got the HNT 26. They've recently come out with the carbon sort of stock chassis style stock, I guess, if you put it that way, with the integrated Arca 4 end. and there's really just not that many uh, hunting focused bipods
Hmm.
in general, highly capable ones, but also Arca ones. I think when we brought our one out, it must have been the first Arca one under sort of 15, 20 ounces.
Hmm.
So yeah, I think it's a perfect alignment for them.
And the name of the
It's
product
also
for everybody.
somewhat in keeping,
Yeah.
yeah, with the SkyPod and, like a different version. A lot of the mechanisms are different, but
Hmm.
similar ideas for a different use case.
Yeah, yeah, that totally makes sense. And the name of the 3 products that you are, well, not 3, but the products that you have coming out are out, I guess?
Yeah, so they have, your question about what have they purchased? They have purchased the Backcountry
Mhm.
and the mountain bipod design, manufacturing rights, all that.
And how
So
are those different from each
essentially,
other?
the main difference between the backcountry and the mountain is the backcountry doesn't have the ability to do the leg spread adjustment. So a bit more like a traditional bipod. The mountain one has the one I produced. Pretty much all the parts are exactly the same, but it had different heads, and that was just easy to swap with one bolt.
Mhm.
And there's actually a pan that's locked off typically, and you just flick a switch, and then that allows pan, and then that allowed the switching of the head. As from what I last saw and what NDT had at Shot Show, they have combined those components. So it's sort of there's no pan, and it's either sort of Picatinny or Arca.
Mm. Very cool, very cool.
I mean, you could swap them on theirs, but it sort of requires swapping more key components of the bipod themselves.
Yeah, that makes sense. So these things are out. There are they currently for sale? Actually, I haven't been on the website in a minute.
So not the MDT ones.
Mhm.
I am selling my version,
Okay.
and practically what's happening is once they have product ready to go, we will do. I will stop selling mine. They'll purchase the stock I have off me,
Mhm.
and then there'll be a transition. And I guess just on that point, we're coming up to our main hunting season in New Zealand.
Mhm.
So we just kind of wanted to ensure that customers who wanted a mountain or a backcountry bipod, there wasn't a sort of 3, 4 month period where they couldn't purchase. So
And
yeah, it's sometime in April, I would say that that transition from NTN gear branded bipods to MDT branded bipods will happen.
yeah, I think that's one of the things I forgot to ask them when I was there is when stuff was actually going to be coming out. So
Mhm.
April is when we should expect it, or at least somewhere around there.
Yeah, I haven't had an update either way.
Mhm.
MDT's sort of what they had said to me was the expectation was around the end of March they should start having product to potentially start going out.
That's very cool. Yeah, I think it's going to be really exciting. Granted, I don't really do hunting, so it's a bit different for me. But I did have an opportunity to test out their entry level bipods and their entry level stock, their field stock, and I had taken it off my competition rifle, which is 22 pounds, with the MDT ACC, and it was so
Yeah.
light. Those
Mm.
the bipods and the stock, and so I think it's going to be very cool to kind of get hands on those, feel them, feel that difference. But I think for those the people that are hunting and like the reputation of MDT, and clearly you put a lot of years in developing these. I think they're going to be an exciting product to hit the market. And I'm hoping they do really well. I think there's definitely a market for it. I mean, we have far more hunters in the United States than we do competitive shooters, right? So I think it makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, I mean, it is focused at a niche of hunters,
Hmm.
but you're right. There's a lot of people hunting. There's a lot of mountainous terrain and a lot of places where you walk a long way, and weight just does make a difference. So, and like with rifles, you don't have one rifle that does it all.
Hmm.
So I think people are getting more used to having specialized products.
Hmm.
So it's yeah, there's definitely a market for these for one use and Scott for another use and yeah,
Yeah, there's a
bunch of
pod
products in between as well.
there's a podcast I used to listen to about long range shooting, and they talked about hunting quite a bit. And one of the things that he would always say is ounces equal pounds and pounds equal pain. And that always really resonated with me.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, that makes a ton of sense, right? He's like, watch the ounces, and you'll relieve yourself of a lot of pain through these hunting trips.
Yeah, and that's what I've found over the years. Like I've done a lot of modification of products,
Hmm.
and you strip 10% out of this weight here, or out of this product here, or this part, 50%. And when you go through everything with that same mentality, you know, you can drastically reduce your pack weight, and that has flow on effects. You reduce your pack weight, you can reduce the size, the weight, the structure you needed for your pack.
Hmm.
Uh, you do lighter weight boots. I'm not carrying as much weight up steep hill. I can move more to running shoe style boots.
Hmm.
I'm currently when it's not when there's no snow on the ground, I'm using crispy Ativas, which is sort of like a heavy duty running shoe. And for bigger game species like red deer and stuff like that, I'm using ATC, the Swaro ATC instead of an 85. And just the whole combination of that means I can move much more freely and faster and be more less sore and more comfortable at the end of the day.
Yeah. That's great. Well, I'm really excited about these. I'm sure a lot of people are. I know you're excited for these products to launch. So if you guys are out there, keep an eye out. Sometime, potentially around April, could be a little later, could be a little bit earlier, but keep an eye out for those. Before we do finish up this podcast, I did want to give you an opportunity to sort of tell people what your social media was, as well as your website, so they have a way to find you.
Yeah, so our website and all our social media is mtngear.nz.
Perfect.
We do have sort of backup pages and stuff, but
Mhm.
that'll find us across. So just www.mtngear.nz, website, MTN Gear NZ, Instagram, Facebook, all that. So you'll be able to find us there. And yeah, I mean, if you have an interest in these sort of products too, like jump online and have a look at, sign up to our newsletter or Instagram page. And like any small business, we are somewhat constrained by typically money. And so one of the things that this has done is helped relieve a little bit of that, but also in conjunction, I'm losing our main product in
Mhm.
a month and a half's time, probably.
Yeah.
So the pressure's on, and so there'll be some new products that we've been working on for a long time and just haven't um, really needed. Would have been good, but it was sort of not the primary focus. And we're a little bit resource constrained to get out the door. So we're hoping to have a bunch of new products, some similar in terms of really focusing on weight and functionality for hunting.
Mhm.
And then some of our first products that will shift into general precision shooting, general shooting, that sort of thing as well. So tripods, bipods, Um, yeah, hunting tripods, spinal shooting bipods, lightweight hunting chassis we've been working on. So yeah, there might be more of interest to come.
That's perfect. We'll make sure that we link everything into the bios for this podcast. I appreciate you being on. I know it was a bit of a pain to get everything working right off the bat, but I'm excited. Thank you very much. And for those of you guys that are listening in, if you get a chance, get out to the range and take a shot. We will see you next time.